You want to know the latest on remote ID in this NPRM business and how it might affect everyone, even people outside the US? Let's get to it. Hey guys, Felix here with Quadcopterguide, and on this channel I cover all kinds of drone tips, tutorials, reviews, as well as to go into some of the filmmaking stuff. But today we have a very important topic. If you're into FPV, if you're only into camera drones, if you want to fly a drone inside of a building, then you need to pay attention because this all affects you. And those of you guys that are outside the US, like me for example, I'm currently not in the US, but I plan on flying drones in the US, so it does affect me. You should listen up. If this thing goes through as is, trust me, the similar rules will be coming to a country near you. On the last day of 2019, the FAA filed the Remote ID NPRM. What is an NPRM? It's a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. They have to put this notice out and collect comments from the community or the industries that it's affecting. Now, when you think notice, I think, like a 5-page, maybe a 10-page PDF. No, this thing, depending on how you print it, is 150 to 300 pages. So it's quite a doozy. Why is it important? This document essentially lays out what the FAA wants to put into law in terms of remote identification of quadcopters or drones. And what's in there? It's quite disturbing. The FAA has been working on getting a manageable accountability system in place for the growing number of unmanned air traffic. Manned air traffic also wants to know where the quadcopters and drones are flying, just to make it safer up there. Now, the FAA has been working with industry leaders, companies, thought leaders in the community to get feedback on how they should best do this. Now, there's all kinds of parties at the table working together to get a kind of a plan in place, which sounds great, right? We need to be able to weed out the people that don't follow the rules and stop getting blamed for every single trash bag that's flying around up there. Now, the only problem, this NPRM, or Notice of Proposed Rule, okay, I won't say it anymore. This NPRM is quite a deviation of what those groups of people came up with. We'll dive into why this is such a bad thing. Now, the FPV-FC, the FPV Freedom Coalition, it's an organization that kind of lobbies, or not lobbies, but tries to stand for the hobby of FPV and just kind of quadcopters in general. They've got a great summary on their website, so some of the stuff you'll be hearing I just got from there because they put it into words better than I could. And then we'll also go through, and I highlighted a couple of the excerpts out of this long document, so you don't have to read all of it. But I do recommend you read the first couple pages. Those are the most important. And you can kind of get your own feel for this. Don't be influenced by somebody on a TV screen. Read about it yourself, educate yourself, so you are well equipped to comment on this, which I will show you how to do at the end. All right, so let's head to the computer so you guys can follow along. So here's the FPVC, it's the FPV Freedom Coalition, like I mentioned. And on this guide to the NPRM for remote ID, they've got kind of a layman's guide for this thing. When the FAA document talks about transmit, it means that either the UAS, and UAS is the unmanned aircraft system, or drone, or quadcopter, whatever you want to call it. The quadcopter itself will have to transmit data, not just your smartphone or control station, also the quadcopter in the air. So that's kind of interesting. Broadcast. This references the ability for it to send the required messages, which I was just talking about, via radio frequency compatible with personal wireless device to any surrounding interested parties. To any surrounding interested parties. Okay? This is the second definition, and I'm already getting goosebumps. The Remote ID USS. This is basically a third-party service supplier that will communicate with your quadcopter and their servers to provide you with the message queue, or the messages that will get sent back and forth. What are these messages? Good question. We're going to cover those as well. So these companies will log your flight data and will hold your data for a period of not more or less 6 months, blah, blah, blah. In case of review or investigation. Okay, so ground station is essentially the remote control or a DJI transmitter, the remote. Okay, so there are 3 kinds of remote ID kind of classes. The first one is the standard remote identification, UAS. So this would have no range limitation for this class and would be BVLOS capable. BVLOS means beyond visual line of sight capable. You might think, oh sweet, we can finally fly beyond visual line of sight if our drone falls into this category. Well, that's what it sounds like, but not so fast. Multiple times in this document, they mention that this rulemaking and the 3-year period it takes to implement it after they go through all the comments and everything will open the doors to allow things like BVLOS. So this is a carrot. Just be careful. Yes, we're going to work our way towards that, and that's good, I agree. But just because it says that one thing, we shouldn't have to swallow all this other stuff. The UAS would have to be designed and produced to fall into this category. So this has to be a new quadcopter then. What about the old things? I have drones. You've got quadcopters. What about those? The UAS would need to meet an FAA accepted means of compliance. That sounds like paperwork and maybe cost? The means of compliance would be performed by the producer of the UAS, not the operator. This would include a review and approval by the FAA of test cases which prove the quality or function of the product. Great. So now we're going to get FAA UAS or remote ID leaks of the new Mavic. It just seems like another step or layer that will delay things, but okay. If that's what we have to deal with, let's keep going. Transmit remote ID messages elements through the internet to a remote ID USS, the unmanned service supplier, from takeoff to landing. Okay, so how I understand this, your quadcopter and or your ground station, which is your transmitter or remote or whatever, will have to broadcast to this service. Both. Your drone has to contact this service. How is that going to do it without first going to your smartphone, which is connected to the data network anyways? The drone or quadcopter will have to be connected to cellular networks. That's what it's looking like. How many of your existing drones do that right now? Not on mine. Okay, so maybe this is just for the wanting to be able to go BVLOS. Let's continue. Simultaneously, the UAS must broadcast the same elements, okay? Using radio frequency. Okay, so it has to broadcast it for sure. Let me guess, that frequency is not going to be the frequencies which we already have on existing quadcopters. Okay, here we go. The remote ID message elements must include the following. Okay, so the UAS ID, serial number or session ID. The serial number should be unique to all quadcopters. So basically, your own has a unique serial ID, okay, serial number. The session ID will be an ID that you can request from this USS to give you a temporary ID in case you don't want to use your serial number. Okay, great. Your latitude and longitude, so they're going to know where you are. Barometric pressure based on altitude reading of both the aircraft and the ground station. What can they figure out with that? Your altitude and your altitude above from where you took off from. Okay, interesting. Time mark, date and time, and emergency status. That is if you're in failsafe, if you're in return to home, if the remote transmission got disconnected, that would be broadcast as emergency status. So this third-party service would be able to tell exactly what you're doing with your drone and where you are. Now let's just hypothetically assume that this would be encrypted and nobody can get into it because we trust the third-party supplier because it's not even the federal government. It gets worse, but I don't want to lay it on just yet. If internet is available at takeoff, the UAS would be required to connect to the remote ID USS and transmit the message elements. Okay. If no internet is available, let's say you like to fly in the middle of nowhere where you don't bother people. I like to do that. I don't bother animals in nature preserves, national parks. If no internet is available, the UAS would only be required to broadcast the message elements directly from the aircraft. Great. If internet is available, but the UAS cannot connect to the USS, then the aircraft must be designed to not take off. Wait, what? If you have internet, but the service is down, you can't fly. Let's say you've got a commercial job. You have worked with your client, weather has been crappy, you finally have a good day, you've got all the approvals you need. Your client's there, you're getting ready to take off. Oh, I'm sorry, the USS is offline. The one that, by the way, I've mentioned, you have to pay a monthly subscription fee to be a part of. That's right, you have to pay monthly. This FAA document guesstimates this fee to be $2.50 a month. Now, it's not a lot, but what are the odds of it being $2.50 and staying like that after this third party realizes, man, working with the FAA, it's pretty costly to get the system in place. A lot of data, we need to hire more engineers, we need more hardware. Oh, we're gonna have to raise the price. Now it ain't no $2.50 anymore. Different point. So your client's next to you, and you can't take off because you can't access the service. Now, in this document, the NPRM, it says that maybe your USS service provider will allow you to have roaming. In case they're offline, you can just connect to another service provider. How many of these plans do you think can have roaming built in? Give me a break. If the UAS loses its connection to the Remote ID USS during flight, the aircraft will be able to continue its flight as long as it's still broadcasting directly from the aircraft. Okay, that's not too bad. If the UAS loses its ability to broadcast, whether connected via internet to the USS or not, the operator should land the craft safely as quickly as possible. The system must be equipped to notify the operator if the aircraft loses the ability to broadcast these message elements. So the quadcopter has to come from the manufacturer with this technology and have been approved by the FAA. This is a big point later on as well. Would be considered publicly accessible information. What? Would be available to the general public. Remote ID USS would be required to provide to the public at no cost the UAS ID message element. Now, these message elements, remember how one of those things was the location of the ground station? So members of the public, at no charge, this is what I read out of this, would be able to locate the quadcopter or its pilot at any time. I don't know about you, but I've heard plenty of stories on Facebook groups how people essentially ended up getting assaulted because ignorant members of the public, I'm sorry, they just are, ignorant members of the public got their underwear in a twist because somebody was flying a quadcopter. They were doing it legally, they were even doing it commercially in some of these cases, and they essentially got assaulted. They had to wait for the police to show up. If you're in the air, you got a $2,000 Phantom 4 Pro version 2 in the air, okay? You're doing your job, you got hired for a job, and then somebody comes up and is in your face. Your primary duty is to control that quadcopter and make sure you're safe. And then somebody walks over, is in your face, and is yelling at you, their spit's flying as they're yelling at you. If that isn't hard enough, it doesn't occur enough, now these people, which are bored out of their mind or they want to harass people, are just going to download this app on the, Drone Pilot Finder, the app. No, maybe I should register that domain name. Drone Pilot Finder. Do you guys understand? They're going to be able to find you. How is this a good idea? Who is this going to help? Okay, I can see the use case where supposedly somebody's flying a drone where they shouldn't be. They're getting around the geofencing somehow, but yet they still follow the rules and have a drone which has this remote ID, and they made sure that it is connected to the internet because before they commit a crime, they want to make sure that they're flying legally. That usually happens. And then law enforcement or whichever federal authority wants to know who the pilot is that's controlling it. Okay, in that use case, it is helpful. From what I've seen, criminals tend to not follow the rules. This would mean that you should not have any access to old quadcopters or parts to make one or import parts to build one to circumvent this remote ID. Is that realistic? I personally don't think so. I just don't think it's possible to do that. Broadcasts from UAV from the UAV would be available to be received by personal wireless devices, including cellular phones and tablets. Remote ID message element broadcasts from UAS would be available for the general public via cellular. That means not just the session ID, but all the messages, the message types that we went through at the beginning. And I don't believe those are all of them. Latitude, longitude, and barometric pressure, altitude, must be transmitted and broadcast no later than 1 second after measurement. Let's look at limited remote ID. Limited remote identification UAS is designed to operate limited remote identification UAS designed to not operate more than 400 feet from the controller. Oh, we've got the 400-foot ceiling rule now. That's not bad. No, this is 400 feet in any direction. What? You're 10 feet off the ground. You can only go 400 feet, and then that's it. It's just not going to go further if you don't have the full package, standard remote ID hardware, subscription, everything. 400 feet. I don't know about you, but my eyes are pretty good, and visual line of sight for me is more than 400 feet, especially if you're flying something bigger like a Phantom or Inspire. 400 feet. UAS must not be capable of broadcasting remote ID messages via radio frequency. Okay. So here's one layer less, so I guess that's why this is limited remote ID. Would be required to connect to the internet and transmit remote ID messaging to the USS. Okay, we'll have to look at this in detail. This doesn't quite make sense to me. Okay, if no internet is available, it must be designed to not take off. If it loses connection, you must land it quickly and safely, blah, blah, blah. Ability to add broadcasting ability to the UAS is prohibited, as it would not be subject to design and production requirements. So this sounds like a retrofit, and it's not allowed. Let's keep that in mind. This does not apply to camera feed or telemetry, okay? All right, here we go. Let's talk about the quadcopters which you and I own currently. The UAS without the remote ID capabilities of the above two systems would only be allowed to fly under two circumstances. Wow, maybe there's hope. Within visual line of sight of the operator or I think that's supposed to say or visual observer, and within the boundaries of an FAA recognized identification area. That is the FIA, by the way, when you hear that. A fixed flying site approved by the FAA. How many times do you fly at an approved flying site currently? Let's just assume that this is going to be the AMA fields, the Amateur Model Aircraft Association, which I used to be a member of back in the day. Good organization, but don't really do much for quadcopter pilots. That is my personal opinion. Even if you wanted to fly at only one of these approved locations and pay the dues and go out there, in the document it said the average distance to one of these AMA fields is currently 32 miles for the average quadcopter unmanned aircraft pilot or controller, whatever you want to call us. 32 miles. And it said the average number of times that people would go to this would be 52. So on a weekend, you'd drive down there. And during the week, forget if you want to let off some steam and fly your drone a little bit. If you don't have this remote ID, you would not be able to do that. The FAA recognized identification areas, the FRIAs, I'm sorry, not FIA, the FRIAs. The community-based organization, CBO, recognized by the administrator would be eligible to apply. Okay, so not everybody, you have to be a CBO. Okay, they're going to list them on the website, how to request. Here we go. After this 12-month period, okay, the applications will be accepted with 12 calendar months from the effective date of the final rule. After the 12-month period, no new applications will be accepted. No new FRIA sites will be approved, meaning the number of sites will never increase, but will stay the same. Yeah, not even that. It's going to decrease. After 12 months, that's it. No more new are getting added to this list. The FAA stated their expectation, and it is that all UAS without remote ID will reach end of life or will be phased out so that the need for FRIA sites will no longer exist. Well, if you need it spelled out any more clearly, This is their goal, like I said. Some group estimated that there's about 1.5 million quadcopters in recreational pilots' hands. This is going to affect a lot of people. Now, this sounds terrible and it's not great. Please do not go and sell all your drone stuff. That is not the right thing to do, especially now. I'll tell you why. Even if it goes into effect just like this and our comments are totally ignored, we still have a good amount of time. I believe it's going to take them at least 18 months to look through all the comments, and I think it's 18 months. It's going to take them 18 months to look through all the comments and get this thing rolled out, to start the rollout. And then the plan is 36 months. 36 months to roll out each phase of this thing. So even if you were to buy a brand new Mavic 3, which might come out soon, but not as soon as January as some people thought, if you were to buy that Mavic 3 at release, you'd have 3 years before you'd have to comply if you wanted to be 100% legal, which we want to comply with these rules. If that wasn't enough, the FAA drone registration requirements will also change. You no longer have to register once for multiple quadcopters or drones. You will have to register each one. So if that fee doesn't change, it's going to be $5 per every single quadcopter or drone over 250 grams, if I am correct. The 250 grams might play a role, but that can also be changed very easily. In this report, which we're going to take a jump into, they mentioned that the average recreational quadcopter pilot owns 1.4 quadcopters. What? 1.4? I don't know. Do you own more than the 1.4 average? I certainly do, but maybe I'm an extreme nerd and I'm an edge case. I'm a quadcopter hoarder. How many do you own? Please jump in the comments. Let me know how many quadcopters you own and how many of those are over 250 grams or 0.55 pounds, which technically will have to go into this bucket of standard or limited remote ID to be able to use it similarly to how we use it now. Please let me know. Can you tell this is working me up a little bit? I'm sorry if you guys aren't used to me like this, but the good thing is there's at least some things we can do. Stay tuned. How about amateur built UAS versus kit built or versus prefabricated build? I don't know about you guys. I don't know if you can see, but that's the Mavic. This right here, which I still have to reveal to you guys. I was going to work on that, but we have to deal with this first. This is more important. That right there is a custom built UAS. What is an amateur built UAS? Person building it fabricates or assembles more than 50%. Guess that's what that is. Because I'm the person that's fabricating that. Not required to comply with the design and production requirements of remote ID. Oh, really? Restricted to operating within a FRIA site. The expectation is that the amateur-built UAS represent a very small portion of the total UAS. I don't think it's that small. Maybe I just feel like that because I'm part of this small segment now, but I don't agree with this. And if you don't agree with anything I've said so far, not said, read so far, then you guys need to first just chill out a little bit. We've got a little bit of time. Get your thoughts in order. Structure them. We'll go through what to do. And everybody in this hobby, in this industry, needs you to go and file a comment before March 2nd of this year. Please, if you take anything away from this, I need you to comment on this at the Federal Register, and I'll link how to do that below. And I'll mention it at the end. Whatever you do, just please, and don't copy and paste comments. Don't get me started about the AMA and how 20% of all the comments or whatever it was some guy figured out are just copy and paste answers in this list, and those are just going to get chucked in a bin from what I understand. So please don't copy and paste. Alright, a prefabricated built UAS is assembled completely from prefab parts. Okay, we could claim that those kinds of quads are made from prefab parts. I didn't make the parts, I just bought them. Person assembling the UAS would be considered the producer and would be required to comply with the design and production requirements of remote ID. So those FAA rules and regulations that producers of UAS had to file to get a certificate that it meets the requirements, that's not going to be DJI or name your favorite drone manufacturer here. It's going to have to be you in this case. And in this NPRM, it says that they estimate this fee to be $313. So if you want to build a quad from prefab parts, you're the producer. You're going to have to pay $313 just to submit the paperwork to get this thing approved. To be able to fly with standard remote ID, which will have an LTE modem on the drone? Woosa. So in the future, quads that are made or drones are going to have to be labeled with standard remote ID UAS or limited remote ID UAS on the box so you can see clearly which of these categories it falls into. You're going to be able to go to the FAA website, look up the model. Perhaps you're buying something used from somebody. They claim it is, but you don't know. You can go on this website. There should be a table, a database, and you can see if, yes, it is standard ID compatible, and you can fly without issues. But once again, this is all new products. Let's jump into the highlighted version real quick. Page 1. Okay, this is just kind of the subsections, table of contents. Executive summary. Let's just look at some of this. For example, the ability to identify and locate UAS operating. Okay. So, kind of an introduction. Why is this required? For example, the ability to identify and locate UAS operating in the United States airspace provides additional situational awareness to manned and unmanned aircraft. In addition, the ability to identify and locate UAS provides critical information to law enforcement and other officials charged with ensuring public safety. While remote identification alone will not enable routine expanded operations such as operations over people or beyond visual line of sight. Did you guys get that? While remote ID alone will not enable things like beyond visual line of sight, it is a critical element for building the UTM, the unmanned traffic management capabilities. The FAA envisions that the remote identification network will form the foundation for development of other technologies that can enable expanded operations. This is exactly what I was talking about. It doesn't mean you'll get BVLOS. This will be the first step. I really hope that people can get BVLOS that aren't Amazon, Google, Pizza Hut, Domino's. The fees and all the costs might prohibit you and I, average Joes, to ever be able to fly BVLOS. All UAS operating in the airspace, except very few exceptions, would be required to follow this rule. Without remote ID capabilities, would only be able to fly at these FRIA sites. Up until now, I had assumed that the solution was going to be a new chip with ADS-B. ADS-B is a system which allows manned aircraft to see other manned aircraft up until now, essentially. With an ADS-B out, the drones or quadcopters could signal to manned traffic, for example, their location, which would help with collision avoidance and all this other stuff. We would know if the airliners are flying next to plastic bags or if it really was a quadcopter, if they had this. But ADS-B got ruled out because the technology, apparently when it's low to the ground, it is not sufficiently accurate, or there's issues with the frequencies. And also, the frequency spectrum would just get way too overpopulated, they say. Bummer. I was really hoping that that would be the direction this would be going. But no, now your drone is going to have to communicate via a modem or a cell phone plan. Sure, the subscription is only going to cost you $250 a month, supposedly, to access the USS. Are you going to get a SIM card into every quad you own? What does that cost monthly? If you guys want, I can upload this with the highlighted versions to the blog. You guys can check it out. Please at least read the highlighted sections and the first couple pages of the executive summary for yourself. I don't want to take any more of your time. We've been through quite a bit. Now, what can you do to help? Don't go sell all your stuff, okay? That's not going to help anyone. take a little bit of time to get your points together, kind of organize your thoughts. The FAA wants comments to certain sections of this document. I will get these sections put together. I'll link below in the video description to an article on quadcopterguide.com that'll list these areas. Don't copy and paste a comment. Get your thoughts together. Explain to the FAA how this will affect you personally. Not the average Joe, not the AMA flyers. How is this going to personally affect you? How is this going to affect the cost of the hobby for you? What if you have to fly to one of these approved sites and pay for the membership dues there? What if they don't allow quadcopters? What if you're frowned upon and you don't not feel invited, but you know what I mean? Write all this stuff down, kind of organize your thoughts, and go to the Federal Register website, which is also linked below, before March 2nd, please. Let's just make end of February our deadline so we don't miss the deadline. That would suck. Go on there, write your comment, submit it, make sure it's there. And if you want a reminder before end of February to be reminded to do this, then I invite you to go to quadcopterguide.com/subscribe. That's how you go to my kind of email newsletter sign up. I will send you an email reminder to go fill out the comments if you want. You're going to go on there, you're going to comment. Once you do that, please, all your flying buddies, share with them this video, share with them these links, tell them how important this is for us hobbyists, for us commercial UAS, drone, quadcopter users, pilots, everybody in the industry. How many mom and pop shops sell drone parts, quadcopter parts online? This affects a pretty large industry now. Speaking of industry, you might have heard of this small company called DJI. Now, they will most likely go through the extra paperwork to be able to sell these officially recognized FAA approved drones. You might think they're gonna love this. They're gonna sell new drones. They're gonna sell a ton of them because it's not gonna be every day, every mom and pop shop that can sell these things. You might think that they totally approve of this. Actually, Brendan Schulman, I think he's the head of the legal counsel, at least for the US, for DJI, wrote an article of how remote ID is important, but not like this. So if a company like DJI can have a view of this that isn't so positive, then we certainly can as well. And it means that something's not right here, and it should not go through like it is. Now, worst case scenario, all of our comments are ignored, but I want you guys to still do it, even if that were to happen. It's going to be interesting, let's just say that. Please stay up to date with all this stuff. Don't just watch this and ignore it and go on. Mark your calendar, get your comments out. The links are in the description below. Please like, subscribe if you're interested in drones and filmmaking gear. I'm normally not this negative, I promise. Share this video with your friends. Please comment below how many quads you own, how many of those weigh over 250 grams, and what you think of this. The more interaction I get in the comments for this video, the more YouTube will push it. So that will also help get this important topic out to lots of people. So I invite you to do that. I normally don't ask you to do all this. In this case, I feel it's important. Please do. Just kind of let this sink in, read through it yourself, get your own opinions up on this, and let's go and comment. All right, guys, enjoy some of the other great content on the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.